Today is Wednesday, August 12. My name is Pastor Michael, and this is Wilderness Wanderings. Today our text comes from Psalm 119. I will praise you with an honest heart as I learn about how fair your decisions are. Verse 7. What did David do after he was anointed king of Israel? He went back to his sheep. The shepherding was in his bones, as they say. He remained one all his life. As a different psalmist once sang, God chose David his servant and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he brought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands he led them. In this devotion, I suggest that integrity is a third quality David had. This is part of a short series exploring what it might mean that David was a man after God's own heart. In the middle of the summer, it offers us an opportunity to allow the Spirit to examine our hearts. We might ask ourselves this question: are our hearts turned towards God? Or to use New Testament language, are we looking towards Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith? The online dictionaries define integrity as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, or the state of being whole and undivided. This appears to fit with what we have been saying about David and would certainly define the word in Psalm 78. It's often been said that someone with integrity acts the same way in private as they do in public. King Saul did not have integrity in any understanding of the word. When he sinned, he asked Samuel to forgive him and return with him so that the people would not know that he had been disobedient. And when Samuel refuses, Saul gets even bolder and says, yes, look, I sinned, I know, I confess. So now honor me before the elders and before Israel. You can read the story in 1 Samuel 15. David, on the other hand, was willing to confess his sin and take responsibility for it. But let's go a little deeper. There is a matter of kingship in Israel. God was Israel's king. So when Israel asked Samuel to anoint a human king over them, he is unwilling. God intervenes, giving permission for a king and recognizing that Israel was rejecting him as their king. God had already anticipated that Israel would do this, and so through Moses, God had given this instruction to a future king. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the Levitical priests. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. There is no record of David ever doing this. However, many of his psalms convey a man who loved God's law. Furthermore, the concern in a human king was that such kings would replace God as Israel's true king. And when David was established as king of Israel, his first official act was to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. You can read that in 2 Samuel 6. He established the worship of God as a central feature of his kingdom, clearly telling Israel that her true king was God. So we might say that a person of integrity is someone whose heart is aimed towards God in obedience and worship. But how do we get to such a place? I think Jesus leads us there in his conversation with that woman at the well in Samaria. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. Jesus is making 2 points here. We have direct access to God through his spirit and our own spirit. We don't need a physical place or object or people through whom we access God. Further, Jesus is the truth. However, we tend to hide the truth about ourselves from him. Like Saul, we want to make ourselves look better than we are. In our worship traditions in the Reformed churches, there is often time in the service given to confession. This is good. But I have found that many people are distracted by all the others around them. Even though no one is asking us to say anything publicly, it is still difficult to be honest in such a crowd. And it may be even more difficult if we are worshiping only with our family. Further, it often takes longer than the minute given in the service for us to hear the Spirit pointing out our sin. Confession needs more time in our lives than the few minutes given to it on Sundays. Christian integrity is honesty before God about ourselves, to let God see the truth of who we are. Then He forgives and we can receive His grace. How has confession gone in your life during this COVID season? Have you made time for it? Remember, God already knows more about you than you do yourself. Trying to hide ourselves from Him is a futile exercise. So let's let Him see our sins and let Him extend His grace to us. As you journey on, go with the blessing of God. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever He may send you. May He guide you through the wilderness, protect you through the storm. May your day end with rejoicing at the wonders He has shown you. May you rest in His provision as He brings night and then new dawn.